You know that feeling when you're watching a movie and you wonder if it's just a fun story or if it's, I don't know, secretly trying to tell you how to see the world? Well, that's exactly the kind of question we're digging into today as we break down the really powerful ideas behind Marxist criticism. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the absolute foundation of society, the economy. Then we'll look at what Marxists see as the real engine of history. After that, we'll uncover the invisible software that shapes what we all believe. Then we'll see how all this applies to stuff we love, like books and movies. And finally, we'll see how these ideas are still being debated and changed even today. So at its very heart, Marxist criticism, which, comes from thinkers like Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, is asking us to do one simple thing: look deeper. It's challenging us to see a story not just as a story, but as a direct product of the social and economic world it came out of. And to really get to the bottom of that, they said, look, if you want to understand any society or any piece of art from that society, you have to start by looking at its economic foundation. That's ground zero. Marx had a term for this: the mode of material production. It sounds kind of academic, but just think of it as society's entire system for survival. You know, how it makes everything from your food to your phone and how it gets all that stuff out to people. For a Marxist critic, absolutely everything starts right here. And this slide right here, this illustrates their biggest idea, often pictured as a kind of building. So at the bottom, you have the economic base. That's all the technology, the labor, the whole economic system. That's the foundation. And then sitting on top of it, shaped by it, is the cultural superstructure. And that's everything else. Our government, our laws, our art, the stories we tell ourselves. Okay, so if the base determines the superstructure, then what actually drives change, right? What pushes society from one era to the next? Well, the Marxist answer is pretty blunt: conflict. The engine of history, in this view, isn't some great leader or a brilliant idea. Nope. It's the constant, grinding struggle between different social classes, all fighting for their own economic and political advantage. That tension, that's what pushes history forward. In our modern capitalist world, this struggle really boils down to two main groups. On one side, you have the bourgeoisie. These are the people who own the means of production, the factories, the land, the software companies. And on the other side, you have the proletariat, the workers, who only have their own labor to sell just to get by. But that brings up a huge question, right? How does the dominant class stay in control without having to use force all the time? Why aren't people just constantly revolting? The answer is this incredibly powerful force called ideology. The best way to think about it is like invisible software running in the background of society. It's all the beliefs and values we just sort of absorb, like the idea of the American dream, that make the way things are seem like the only way things could ever be. It makes it all feel normal, natural. Engels actually called this a false consciousness. And it's a pretty clever trick when you think about it. See, ideology works so well because it convinces us that the interests of the powerful, like, say, endless economic growth, are actually what's best for everyone. It just smooths over the real conflicts and keeps the whole system humming along. Okay, so what in the world does all this have to do with your favorite Netflix show or that novel you just read? Well, this is where Marxist literary criticism gets really, really interesting. It basically argues that there's no such thing as a timeless classic. Instead, every story is an artifact totally embedded in the economic and historical moment that produced it. Now, early on, there was this really rigid approach, which people now call vulgar Marxism. It pretty much treated art as a simple one-to-one reflection of the economy. But thankfully, more flexible thinkers came along and argued that no, art's relationship with ideology is way more complicated. They said that great art can actually have some independence, and it can even critique the very system that created it. And this led to some amazing debates about what kind of art is actually revolutionary. So you had this guy, George Lukács, who was all about 19th century realism. He thought writers like Balzac were geniuses because their super detailed novels accidentally revealed all the hidden problems in society. But then you had the Frankfurt School, and they argued the exact opposite. For them, the confusing, fragmented style of modernists like James Joyce was the real critique, because it reflected how broken life is under capitalism. And then there was the playwright Bertolt Brecht. He just wanted to wake people up. He used something called an alienation effect to keep reminding the audience, hey, you're watching a play, so they would think critically instead of just getting lost in the emotion. But the conversation didn't stop there. I mean, Marxist thought isn't some dusty old relic. It's a living, breathing tradition that's continued to evolve and adapt as the world has changed. All through the 20th century, you had these brilliant thinkers adding new layers. Antonio Gramsci gave us the concept of hegemony, which is how power works best when people agree to the system, not when they're forced. Then Louis Althusser argued that culture isn't just a puppet of the economy, it has relative autonomy. And more recently, Frederick Jameson talked about the political unconscious of a story, all the hidden fears about class and history that a story tries to bury, but that just keep bubbling up to the surface. So, the really crucial point here is that modern Marxist criticism isn't about that simple pyramid model anymore. Now, it sees society less as a base directly controlling a superstructure and more as this complex web of interactions, where culture can actually push back and influence the economy too. So, what Marxist criticism really gives us is a new set of tools. It's a lens for peeling back the layers of all the culture that's around us. Seriously, try it next time you're watching a superhero movie or binging a series. Just ask yourself, who has the power in this story? Who doesn't? And what is this story quietly trying to convince me is normal? You know what? The answers might actually surprise you.